to the police. All around, especially in town. No one couldn't walk alone. Tongue was like a battle zone.
Welcome back to it, guys. The Now Morning Show continues. As on a Monday, we are joined by Inspector Michelle Lewis from the TTPS. This morning, giving us some insight on the care of the elderly and children. As over the weekend, we would have observed Elderly Abuse Awareness Day on Saturday, even though the day was actually yesterday.
Yes.
Just didn't want to clash with Father's Day. So good morning and welcome back to the Now.
Morning to the both of you. Morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Always a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you with us.
As usual.
We're talking about something that is timeless, though. And so
Yes.
first, to give a little context as to the observance over the weekend, what did that mark? Because it wasn't the inaugural version,
No.
but it would be a great way to usher into why we're observing elderly and childhood care, essentially.
Yeah. Well, basically, the day is actually Elderly Awareness Day.
Right.
The TTPS just included in the conversation because we have been treating with the topic of child abuse for quite a while. But the month of June is actually being recognized for the Elderly Abuse Awareness Month.
Okay.
And the day is actually the 15th, which have been yesterday. And as you rightly said, it will have clashed with Friday, Father's Day.
Right.
So we had it, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service in collaboration with the Ministry of Gender. We had a symposium, Elder Abuse Symposium, but it was primarily carried by the Victim Witness and Support Unit of the TTPS. And so we had officers, both sworn and non-sworn there, where we invited the elderly persons from the national community, and was really a wonderful symposium. Let me just mention that for elder abuse, or when we say the word elder and we put it in context, it really speaks to persons who are 60 years and older.
Right. What were some of the findings of the symposium?
Well, the symposium really talked about, it had different sections, different segments in relation to how we can be more aware of the needs of the elderly and how we can protect the elderly. And so that is where our conversation is this morning, in terms of giving some tips to the general public of what we can do to help their lives to be easier.
Inspector, before we get into some of those tips this morning, let's speak about what the police have to adhere to, what legislation governs it. I know, of course, we have the Children's Act, which you will go into, and those that govern criminal offences. But when it comes to the elders particularly, is there anything in place?
No, there's no portion of legislation that has Elder Abuse Act on it. As you do have for children, if an offence happens against an elderly person, it will be classified or treated with under any of the different pieces of legislation. So if it is robbery or larceny from a person, it will be treated like that, as against an offence for a child, which will be categorized under the Children's Act.
Are there any particular offences that you see a higher rate of when it comes to the elderly population?
Well, it's only when you look into the details of it you'll recognize that there's the person involved is an elderly person. But really and truly, within recent time, we've been seeing an increase in homicides against the elderly in terms of home invasion and that kind of thing. And when you look at the categories of abuse against an elderly person, it speaks to similar in relation to child or anybody, where it has physical abuse, financial meaning that you would have used their money for something else other than for their purpose, right? Or to take care of them. Physical abuse, so sometimes persons enter the home of an elderly person to commit a criminal offense, and the elderly person end up dying in the whole situation. So I've seen maybe about 4 within the last month of elderly persons, 60, 73, 64, them kind of ages, who have been victims of a homicide, because of an incident that would have occurred. So the TTPS, we are seeing it, and so with the symposium that we have had on Saturday, we're recognizing that more with the world, that more needs to be done to bring that awareness in relation to the elderly population in our country, who we really treasure and appreciate, because really without them, you and I wouldn't be here, right? They would have born some of us into this world. So we definitely, and we need the both. When I say born, don't talk about the female only, because you need the men to bring the child, right? So you're really, the elderly population is really a treasure in our nation because of their wisdom, their guidance, their love, and everything that goes with it. You know, I don't know why grandchildren love their grannies and the grandpa more
We
than
can have a whole other show.
But
I could go down
that is
the
just to
road.
tell you their value,
Absolutely,
invaluable
absolutely.
contribution to family and society.
So how do we show that value? How do we as a society safeguard the elderly and, of course, children?
Now, we don't want to take away their level of responsibility, because when you have an elderly person around you and you take away too many things that they would normally do for themselves, we don't want them to feel as if they're invalid, or as we like to say, invalid, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what we try to do is to work alongside what they like, knowing very well what can be of a harm to them. So, for example, they have a tendency to be less minded of risk factors, and so sometimes persons will come around in the neighborhood, maybe to cut the grass in their yard, and maybe to offer to clean the windows and that kind of thing. These are things where persons who we have recognized would really want to see, what you have in your home, how they can get to the elderly person, and how they can come back and commit a criminal offense.
Right.
So a lot of times we encourage them to get a reference either from a neighbor who you really trust, or of course from your child or a relative who can send this person to do this show at home in a safe way. Another thing that we want to mention as well is, for example, if it is that some of them do still go to the financial institution to withdraw, that you go with them. You send someone with them, or you have someone drop them and pick them up who you trust. Right? We have seen in the past where a lot of elderly persons would have been robbed of their pension money when they would have withdrawn it from the bank. And so this is something that you also have to be mindful of. So sometimes they may want to go during the day around 9, 10 o'clock when it's nice, and they would have woken up and taken their time. And it's just maybe to make sure you have someone in place. If it is not yourself because of whatever reason, maybe you can't do it every time, but there's someone in place who you trust who can take them safely and pick them back up, right? That will also help in terms of reducing crime, one, but also the risk of them becoming a victim of a criminal offense.
Right.
And those are incidents that actually happen a lot with the elderly people.
When it comes to the operations of the TTPS, particularly in these circumstances, is there any training or so forth that would take place on a different level to ensure that you're able to have those conversations and treat with it as necessary?
I remember many years ago, I actually did a course in the TTPS through the UE. It was to sensitize officers who were community police, because most times the officers attached to community police would treat with the elderly and the children. And so the police service, we do that. We give special training for officers in that regard. Yes, we do. Yeah.
Something that is necessary, of course.
Yes, it is.
But it also sounds like the necessary support from legislature is still an opportunity.
Yes.
Specifically when it comes to the elderly. So are there strides being made towards that end, perhaps?
I am not certain, so I don't want to speak to it, but certainly it would give some add volumes to what we can do as a society for the elderly in the society. But one of the things that we really want to let people know as well is that even though you have elderly persons in the society, we really want you to pay attention to them and give them the love and care that is needed, that they will not seek to get it from someone outside of the home, or someone who they love or trust to be able to, help with that. Even though I've said that, we have seen circumstances where relatives themselves would come around just around pension time by their grandfather or the elderly relative just to be able to get that financial taken, which is really can be categorized as financial abuse against the elderly.
So maybe if we can break those down. So we mentioned financial abuse, but we also do see as well physical abuse, unfortunately, in some circumstances.
Right, and I mentioned that in relation to robberies in homes and that kind of thing. So yeah, that does happen.
So if we could go back to the hours of operation, because I know, for example, some institutions in Trinidad and Tobago and corporate entities, they would have introduced different hours in order to accommodate those who were elderly. Do you think measures like that being taken can positively impact the older population?
Certainly, certainly it will. I know as I referenced the financial institutions, I know there have been some institutions have actually had training for the elderly persons that they can learn how to do online banking for themselves, which would be a bit safer for them. A lot of health facilities, like health centers in particular, have hours that go a little later than the normal time that we would know the communities, the health centers will go over. So some will go till 10 p.m. and that kind of thing, as opposed to the 7 to 3. So we do see some things, some institutions, some organizations going that way. But certainly there's always more that can be done to make them feel more part of the society. But really and truly, when you look at the community and what the community can do in terms of protecting the elderly and making them feel part of what is taking place. For example, when there are family days in the community, to bring them and get them involved, have activities geared towards them, that they can take part in it, you know, and that they really feel that they're not neglected as, you know, contributing to the development of Trinidad in one way or the other, and now they're almost forgotten. So things like that make them feel really a part of the community still, and that they have something of value to contribute.
Absolutely well said, Inspector. Couldn't agree with you more, because I certainly do appreciate the value that the elderly have added in my life, as we are seeing here to the national landscape as well. So thank you for joining us. It is certainly one of those conversations you can continue, but until next Monday. This morning we spoke about the welfare and safeguarding of the young and the old, and we certainly hope that you continue to be a part of that contribution as well. We're going to be back with birthdays after these messages, so stick around, guys. Then our morning show continues after these messages.